I thought, well, if you're going to be a proper scientist and curious about this stuff, you better look into it properly. So I actually carried out 150 investigations over 10 years, and this will be during the 1990s mainly. And in addition, I did engage with at least about 500 people altogether who have witnessed UAPs.
You know, is that your experience, and what do you think that we're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, there has been increased sightings of the UAPs, and particularly with smartphone recordings. I've witnessed with others now,
Hmm.
mind you, and recorded a UFO over Loch Key in County Roscommon.
Mm.
That's in the northwest of Ireland. It's just either you poo-poo it, you ridicule it because it doesn't integrate with your own reality. It's very
Mm.
difficult for some people. So the UAP, the NOHA, does pose um, challenges to our own, as I said, notions of reality.
The following is my conversation with Dr. Eamonn Ansbro, co-hosted by my friend Tom Vernon. In this episode, there were some slight technical issues which I've tried my very best to gloss over in post-production. Eamonn is the Director and Research Astronomer based out at Kingsland Observatory in Roscommon, Ireland. Eamonn was originally a meteorological observer with the Ministry of Defence in the UK. Eamonn is also a member of SETI, which is the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence research network, as well as writing and presenting a paper to SETI in 2001, indicating that Earth was under surveillance by extraterrestrials, among countless other papers and research work. In this conversation, Tom and I discuss with Eamonn his thoughts on what UFO UAP represent, the impact on humanity, and his work, as well as his own sighting of a UFO which he captured on camera. A heavily underrated academic with a rich history researching the subject of UAP, non-human intelligence and astronomy for decades, and an all-round nice guy. So the following is my conversation with Eamonn Ansbro. Thank you so much for joining me, Eamonn. I really appreciate your time and talking to me today. I've also got Tom here with me. Just say hello, Tom, so we can see you.
Hi, guys. Hi, folks. Pleasure to
Brilliant.
be here.
Eamonn, if it's okay, I want to jump in with the first question. I'm sort of keen to know what first piqued your interest in the UAP, UFO subject.
Okay, well, I had a background in professionally in meteorology as well as astrophysics much later on. Key area, or UFOs as we used to call them in the old days, back in 1990, it was actually another astronomer who told me about people ringing up over some years about lights in the sky. And he said it seemed to be on the increase with quite a lot of the public. Um, and I said, gosh, that's interesting, because he knew I had a background in those two areas, not UFOs now, all right? So I said, look, let me have a look at this. I'm curious. Oh, actually, I looked into it, and in fact, I met about 20 people altogether around 1990 through this other astronomer who was the director of one of the institutes here in the Republic of Ireland. And I was actually totally confused as to what people were seeing. It just didn't fit anything that I knew of. And I had quite a background in atmospheric physics, meteorology, astronomy, all these areas. So I thought, well, there's something to do with UFOs that people see, which I knew nothing about. So what I decided, actually, I got onto three organizations that had databases. This would be in the US, the UK, and in France. And from those databases, then I discovered that there was common characteristics of what people were seeing in the two continents we're talking about, the Americas and also in Europe. So it wasn't a localized situation where all these sightings were occurring down in the southwest of Ireland. So as from there, I took it more serious, and wrote a number of articles for an astronomy journal. Some theories I had of what this could be about. And then I thought the only way to meet people, because it obviously the subject itself at the time, and this is over 30 years ago now, we're talking about, was taboo at the time. So I thought, well, if you're going to be a proper scientist and curious about this stuff, you better look into it properly, and don't have any preconceptions about it, which I didn't. I was literally innocent, raw, open for whatever, with discrimination, of course, you know. So you could say in a neutral, positive way, my approach to this research. So I was doing this in my spare time because I had other professional work I had to do at the time. But I took it more of a secondary type of research I was dealing with. So what I decided to actually, with the help of the director of this institute, is that I wanted to see a lot more people. So we set up meetings then. This was after about 12 months when I was totally confused what we were looking at. And so we had the first meeting in the Southwest where all this activity was happening, and 70 people turned up, which was a pretty good number of people. And it was from there actually that others came forward. Then I thought, well, let's have a look at other areas of the country. So then I also had meetings set up and advertised in Cork and in Dublin twice, Galway and Limerick, some of the major cities here. And that provided enough information for me to go to this much further, because I realized that there was definite common characteristics behind all this. At the same time, I was looking for patterns and cycles to it as well. So I did write an article which came out in 1992. And I had some ideas what it could be, but it was purely hypothetical at the time. I thought there may be an astronomical link to it, so I was rather biased, you could say, towards this. So that's how I started, anyway.
And stuff. Do you feel that kind of anecdotally and in terms of kind of coverage that we're seeing increased UAP sightings, UFO sightings, and if so, you know, is that your experience, and what do you think that we're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, there has been increased sightings of the UAPs, and particularly with smartphone recordings. I actually get a lot of smartphone recordings from the public through other stuff I've done of the research I've been doing in the last 2 or 3 years. So the society is certainly becoming aware that there is something in the background, so to speak, that hasn't gone away. You know, it's endured quite a period of time. You know, it wasn't that sort of you know, that we thought about. It's consistent. So most people are exploring themselves, and I think this is what, from my experience of meeting many others, is that there's an exploration not just of the UFO phenomena, but also wondering why are they seeing the actual UFO itself. So they're wondering, and these are and so there's answers outside of themselves. But so when you have such a phenomenon like the UAP, it may be curiosity for some that this phenomena is in their backyard. So I actually carried out 150 investigations over 10 years, and this will be during the 1990s mainly. And in addition, I did engage with at least about 500 people altogether who have witnessed UAPs, but I wouldn't have gone into any thorough examination from their sightings or what they had witnessed. But I felt just 150 was enough to tell me a lot about what this was about. Now, mind you, I'd have my own preconceptions about this, of course. But you know, you just cannot go on the basis of reading books and what others have to say to some degree. You really have to get out there and, as a scientist, and research it yourselves.
Mm, mm. There's some really credible people that are coming through as well that believe they've seen extraordinary craft, but in general, there still seems to be a great reluctance of people wanting to go on the record for fear of ridicule. Why do you think that there's such a stigma around this reporting when it's coming from trained observers like pilots and astronomers and whatnot? Because surely we need these credible voices to validate the topic.
Sure, yeah. Well, indeed, you're witnessing the UAP, as we politically have to be correct nowadays, in the last 4 years, sort of
Yeah.
UFOs, and also the NHI craft, the non-human intelligence, or the intelligence behind the craft, because we are dealing with craft here. And I see it as an epistemological shock
Yeah.
when everything you thought was true isn't. It's incredible, to be in that paradigm of thinking. So, we've all been brought up to, uh, you could say, a reality in life and what's acceptable. But then when you have this spanner in the works, as I would call it, it's just either you poo-poo it, you ridicule it because it doesn't integrate with your own reality. It's very difficult for some people. So the UAP, the NOHA, does pose challenges to our own, as I said, notions of reality. So the potential implications of witnessing a UAP and eventual disclosure of non-human intelligence and technology, complicated, maybe a messy process, perhaps even for decades. Now, that's my own opinion. I mean, it took 150 years from the publication of Copernicus' work to gain acceptance of the heliocentric model that asserts that the sun is the center of the universe. Now, today, paradigms may change more quickly, but there is an added twist in the case of the UAP NHI. I call it that just to keep it short. Whereas Copernicus was proposing a single definition shift, the complexity of the UAP NHA phenomena confronts us with a deeper set of challenges to our own core notions of reality. So, for example, what it means to be human, the sovereignty of the nation state, the authority of religions, the range of species involved in their motivations, the possible presence of hybrids on our planet is a likely upheaval in the sciences, including free energy, anti-gravity, wormholes, and the potential discovery of long-standing collaboration between rogue elements of the military, intelligence, complex, and certain non-human species.
Amazing, amazing stuff. So I was looking at your work earlier, and it was mind blowing. I mean, an 80% success rate in tracking these things and everything. Would you mind giving us a little on some of your personal experience with UAP and sightings?
Yeah, sure. Well, I've witnessed with others now, mind you, and recorded a UFO over Loch Key in County Roscommon. That's in the northwest of Ireland. And this was shown actually on the very popular show, The Late Late Show, which was seen by about 1 million people actually back in 1998. And we actually got the recording based on the model that I had worked out during the mid-90s of where events may occur at specific locations at specific time within the qualifying limits of the model to work. Now, this is, you have to realize when you mentioned earlier about an 80% success rate, that's only, excuse me, that's only based on selectivity. This is not based on if you had, say, 100 locations, that could come right down. It could come down to 40%,
Right.
It was just, you could say, a bit of luck in a way, but there was very few locations. I had Loch Key in County Roscommon, but I also had in the southwest, which was also an active area, which we also had a success rate there. So, and I think they were the main two that we did the first tests of the theory. But because it was 2 out of 2, I thought this is amazing. Can this be true? Can this going to happen everywhere? There have been other locations. I've been to France, to 2 locations there, one in Brittany and one in Nice, off the north. I think it was west of Nice in the south of France, and in Brittany it worked, and then Nice it didn't. So obviously, statistically, it was breaking down a bit. At the time, actually, the model I thought was rather crude. I had worked with another guy on this in the modeling, and we felt that because we were using pretty ancient technology, I mean, we're talking about Fortran, if anybody's heard about Fortran. So we're using 1980s technology to figure out all this stuff during the 1990s. So since then, actually, I've upgraded now to artificial intelligence. I'm using Python.
Right.
So,
fantastic. Eamonn, can I ask, why do you think that sort of from a societal level, there's such kind of skepticism when you think that the universe is so vast that it would be kind of impossible that, to write anything off? Do you kind of get a sense as to why there is such skepticism?
Yes, I do actually. I mean, it's like everything in life, you can have skepticism. So probably this hasn't occurred to most of us who find, this subject absolutely captivating, like me personally. But some of the people who that have no interest about UFOs right now, it's not because they haven't been presented with enough evidence. It's simply because they are not interested. Now, like genuinely not interested, even if the full reality and disclosure happens and every human being across the planet understands that these things are real, a lot of people are still not interested. I'm not being negative about this. It's a psychological perception problem that I see. So it's actually hard for many of us here to imagine this. But consider that many people are not interested about many crucially important things happening on our planet right now that are already accepted as reality by, 90% of the population will say, or 80%. For example, climate change would be one. Some people believe it's fake and a conspiracy, and some people believe it's real, and some people just are not interested one way or the other. So UFOs, it's not necessarily because you haven't given them enough evidence, but some of them it's because they're completely apathetic about it. It's about the best I can put.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I know you're Tom and yourself, Jimmy. I know you're all interested in this, but you have to take other people who are not interested.
Absolutely.
And you don't actually hear from those people like through the media, but from my own research, what I've come across, there's an awful lot of people who are not interested or totally skeptical. And by the way, that's not a criticism at all with those people. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you there seems to be a kind of lots of similarities, kind of independent similarities between sightings and types of sightings by different kind of timeframes in different countries, communities. Do you kind of get a sense as to why that is? So, different kind of timeframes and in different areas, we're getting kind of similarities. Do you get any kind of a sense as to why that is?
Yeah, I mean, I've studied databases with 500 million reports, which are validated UAP reports we're talking about, from over 200 countries. So when you take that into consideration, you've nearly got the whole list for the United Nations there. Now, they all show the same characteristics, either the orbs or drones, cylinder type craft, triangular type craft. So what it shows is we are dealing with a UAP on a global basis. UAP, I suspect, has been monitoring the Earth for some time, and it recently that the Pentagon is disclosing the reality. You probably know, back in 2017 through the New York Times. So this generated a lot of interest. So yes, indeed, there is a lot of interest, but we're not talking about the converted here, but it has actually seeded quite a lot of people as to their curiosity about it, but they may not have the time actually to follow through and to know in more detail, but they're realizing that we're not alone. It is a very generalized sweeping statement to make, but there has been polls regarding, in surveys, that is, to find out what people are, do people think there's life in the universe? Of course, it's very general. And of course, they're all saying, at least 60 or 70% said there is life in the universe. But I think trying to integrate the UAP as part of that is quite difficult at this point in time.
Now, you've had a fascinating insight into some communities which we've not heard a great deal from. Astronomy and SETI. I know Avi Loeb's doing the Galileo project and whatnot, but you can give us some really good insight into those worlds. So what's been your experience within those communities? And do you feel like the tide is changing at all?
Yeah, well, I suppose over 20 years ago, you could not deal with UFOs. It was a taboo subject. Again, this is a psychological perception problem with most scientists, not just scientists, it's even with a certain audience of the general public. This has changed somewhat with the US government setting up offices, funding projects in the UAP field. And then you have the more recent, the last 2 years, the national congressional hearings in the last summer exposed for the first time the UP-related crashes and biologics, quoting David Grush. So it's come a long way to be more respectable. Even the media are not sniggering anymore. I remember the media way back; they were always sniggering about this whole area, and I just found it, a lack. Just the amount of ignorance by even the media annoyed me, actually, even 20 years ago. But that's changed now. The media has not so much warmed to it, but they've taken it seriously now for the very first time.
Fantastic. Yeah, I really agree, especially with some of the Hill and Rising, and some of these non-mainstream are really taking the flag and running with it, aren't they? So do you think that within our lifetimes we'll get some conclusive proof of either non-human intelligence or extraterrestrial life or whatever it may be?
As I mentioned earlier on about not just Copernicus, but even Galileo, it took many years after for the stuff to be accepted. Even with Einstein's theory of relativity, it took 20 years before it was accepted. So, I mean, you're dealing with something very different here, because there's an enormous amount of people actually have disclosed their experiences of either witnessing the UAP, its interactions with the non-human intelligence behind the craft. And it's the agenda of governments that would prefer to deny, of course, the existence of the UAP, but it's creeping up on them. The truth comes out eventually in time. We have a truth there. Because we have a reality, we have a truth there. It's a perception problem at the moment, I see, not just different audience, but even governments as well. So I think eventually it will be accepted, but I don't think it will be, how should I put it? I think once you have the credibility factor in there through, say, scientists, institutions, which is gradually getting there now, even SETI, and which I'm part of the SETI fraternity myself for many
Hmm.
years, the search for extraterrestrial
Mm.
intelligence. I would not dare to mention UFOs within the SETI fraternity, even over, well, I've been in it, well, I suppose 22 years now. I've given a lot of presentations to SETI,
Mm.
but I would never bring in the whole UFO area. But in talking to some of these folks, I can sort of sense if they're psychologically right for something like this, but a lot of them
Hmm.
weren't at all.
Right.
So I think in time it will be accepted, but I think the disclosure, I know that's been a word that's been bandied about now for the last couple of years. I think the disclosure will be a small disclosure, sorry, a
Mm.
small D in disclosure,
Yeah.
and that's coming from the public. The public will drive this. I
Mm.
don't think it's going to come through with the big D disclosure from, say, President Biden coming forward. We have now extraterrestrials here or
Mm.
non-human intelligence, blah, blah, blah. It's like, what? Because there are ramifications with all that. So
Hmm.
I think it's a slow, organic progression for this to
Hmm.
come out. So I know there's going to be a lot in the UFO community are going to be disappointed that it hasn't happened, the disclosure. I don't think it's going to happen the way we're thinking. I think
Hmm.
it's going to be driven by the public for this to come forward, having a lot more opportunities for, say, institutions to get involved in this. And as you quite rightly said there, Tom and Jimmy, about the Galileo project, there's actually other projects as well that have started up in the last
Mm.
3 years. There's the first one in Europe there started in Germany at one of the
Hmm.
universities, and they got funded as well.
Mm.
But, I still feel there's sort of tipping around the edge of this because, okay, it's an astrophysical approach to the
Mm.
UAP phenomena, which is, respectable, all right. But unfortunately, and this is my own opinion, is that that's only one aspect of it. Even if you do get the data from that, okay, it's going to tell you something.
Mm.
But it's much deeper than that from my
Mm.
own experience of exploring this for over 30 years.
Hmm.
I think that
Mm.
that kind of leads on to my next question, really. How do you think that people or kind of communities can kind of stay grounded in the face of kind of potential challenges to their worldview?
Yeah, well, there are many ways to help shape the future. So the wide range of potential implications identified in this project suggests that many ways to feel empowered in shaping preferred futures using one's knowledge, skills, passions, networks. And I think this is where it's going to come about. It's going to come from us humans. Uh, and we have an amazing opportunity with the whole global network and the considerable amount of sites now that have an interest in this area. I see it as a multiplier effect,
Hmm.
and that's where I think it's not just the disclosure, but it's going to leave an awful lot of people behind. And I'm talking about even the current media behind. I mean, they've lost an awful lot anyway in other subjects. But when it comes to this area, they could completely lose out because this is what the public want. What we have in society, or should I say, we have, there's one problem there that I see in society, and that is with our worldview. There isn't an accepted worldview globally. All right. So we have actually two worldviews in society. The first worldview is that reality is fully encompassed in this physical material world, so to speak. And these are the things that we can directly observe using traditional proven scientific methods. So, given this, consciousness is another phenomenon of the human brain. Now, it's fine to engage in metaphysical speculation, like you'd see on television, these paranormal programs, as an example. But there's no life separation from the human body, as I would see it.
Mm.
So we have one worldview that's a scientific materialistic perspective.
Mm-hmm.
The second worldview is very different to that. So you have a very different audience. These are things that manifest in the physical world that seem to originate in another dimension. And you can see the whole UAP area can come into this as well. So it's something unseen through scientific observations. I mean, consciousness again,
Mm.
um, the whole spirit world. So there's what we would have thought in the materialistic area as a separate item from the physical body. It's something to do with ourselves, like near-death experiences people have, or
Mm.
out-of-body experiences. Telepathy has been proven. The Chinese have done that. I've actually
Mm.
read papers. Telepathy is for real. People
Yeah.
can't believe that. I've often said to people there in the last 2 or 3 years, you won't need your telephones and your mobiles. If you can
Mm.
do it by telepathy, it's the same thing.
Do you think that consciousness could act as a carrier wave for
I
a
do indeed,
superluminary
yes. I think when you go into the accepted areas in physics now, particularly the new physics, dealing with quantum communications, so you're dealing with action at a distance, no matter what
Mm.
the distance. So,
Mm.
if you're trying to communicate to somebody 100,000 light years away, within
Mm.
our galaxy, that's like from literally at the edge of the galaxy here where we are to the
Mm.
far end, 100,000. It's instantaneous. There's
Yes.
no time difference. There's no
Mm.
time latency there.
Mm.
Where if you're using radio, well, guess what? It's 100,000 years to send a signal.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so I actually was aware of this many years ago, and
Mm.
in fact, what actually prompted me, because I was, you know, in the SETI fraternity, I was
Mm.
completely disagreeing with the whole electromagnetic spectrum for this. I
Mm.
thought, no, and of course, after privately having done an enormous amount of research in the UAP area,
Mm.
because I was discovering people had this connection, or some of them had a connection with the UFO.
Mm.
The UFO at the time, we'll say, would prompt them psychically to expand
Mm.
themselves further. So it's not just a sighting of a ball of light or a construct that's just there and it looks, oh wow, it looks dazzling. There's a connection with the human actually with this.
Mm.
So I
Mm.
only discovered that back in the 1990s, and you have to be true to the situation that there is a connection, a true connection of the
Mm.
human to the oh,
Mm.
all right. So when it comes to communications, I think it was about 10 years ago, I was realizing that there must be a different way of doing this with say, for example, I'm assuming, of course, there's extraterrestrial civilizations out there somewhere. We
Mm.
can't be the only ones here.
Mm.
So one way I thought, well, forget about the electromagnetic spectrum. If I was an extraterrestrial of some advancement, how would I do this? So I've actually put myself in those shoes, so to speak.
Mm.
I actually did it back in, let me see, I came out with an article back in 1992, a long time ago, where I was thinking if I was coming to this planet, what are the most likely routes to get here?
Mhm.
So, with the help of another astronomer, we actually did 3D modeling of all
Mm.
the stars actually going out to 60 light years to find out what routes would you take to get here. So that article was produced, so it probably was ahead of its time, what was
Mm.
there. But regarding the communications, that was much later once I had got a lot more research under my belt in the true sense of the word,
Mm.
not just a mechanistic approach, but I had to bring in also the experiential into this, which would be very unusual from a physics point of view. So, yeah, about 10 years ago, I came up with the idea that maybe it's quantum communications they could be using.
Mm.
I'm, talking about the ETCs, extraterrestrial and civilizations. So if you were, say, an extraterrestrial civilization, bit more advanced than us, you have this Kardashev classification, from 0 to 4.
Mhm.
Earth is our civilizations classified as 0.7. So somebody a little bit older than us, you know, in age-wise, say about 1 to 1.5. Well, then if that's the case, then they would have worked out their planetary affairs for their own planet and then be in a much better position to expand out to other stellar systems that would be local in the neighborhood. So not only from the point of view of interstellar travel, but you'd have to have the communications linked in with that somehow. So there's no point, you know, using chemical rockets going 50 light years away,
No.
or trying to do the communications, which is 50 light years in distance. So the only way I could see do it is some using, well, I didn't want to go into the whole interstellar travel part of it, but I thought maybe I could figure out the communications, how they may be doing from my own experience of meeting so many people that have had experiences with the UFOs. So I actually introduced what I would call quantum superluminal communications. So that's faster than light communications, instantaneous communications. So I started doing some experiments in that area, and well, just to say that they were unsuccessful. I mean, you have to learn from your failures, but later on, two of us actually had figured out how it could be done. And so we explored actually the precursor stage to quantum superluminal communications, and that is telephone anti-telephone. So you can look it up on Wikipedia, and basically what it means is that if you can achieve telephone anti-telephone experiment, then you could go back in time. You could go back, say, an hour or 2 hours, or maybe go into the future. Don't know. We haven't actually achieved that yet, but we're actually working on that now as we speak. In fact, there's actually interest in Europe, of not us, but there's a Spanish Aerospace Institute that has setting up a consortium in the EU, within ESA, I suppose. And if everything goes well, we may be part of that as a member.
Fantastic.
And all I do know is that there has been no developments in this area. And I think actually we could play quite a role in this, because we have had enough experience so far with all our experimentation. We haven't achieved time latency yet, but if we do achieve time latency, then we're in a position to do the next stage, which is the most exciting one, which is the communications itself.
It's fascinating. Professor Nolan said that the highest form of technology in his eyes was biology, and that as good as our science gets, we'll never catch up with nature. So the idea that it's consciousness based and yet still the next step from our biomechanical way of things is fascinating to me. So thank you so much for that. So how do you think that people should be feeling right now? There seems to be several different narratives from the military. There's an implication that we should perhaps be afraid. There's other people that see it as a benefactor or a sort of watchful guardian presence. How do you think people should feel?
Yeah, I think this comes back to, you know, a lot of people have fear in many areas, you know, and when it comes to a subject like this, yeah, I think many people will remain disengaged, and would find out this is now on the negative side. All right, there's a positive side to it as well, because you have different worldviews. You know, it's a psychological perception problem, as I mentioned earlier on. So others would find the UAP hostile. So the initial reaction to disclosure of the UAPs may be marred by skepticism and disengagement. It's like what I mentioned earlier on about, you know, apathy. All right. So there's a culture already saturated with misinformation and fatigue over global issues, and that's a big struggle for people to discriminate all this kind of stuff. So, so to connect with the enormity of such a revelation would be, it's a real problem. So the situation could be exacerbated by. I think it's been. I mean, the whole thing actually has been exacerbated by the sophisticated video hoaxes leading to further public confusion over the truth, and moreover, extreme religious factions may vehemently oppose, the validation of non-human intelligences, and potentially, and this would be quite normal, with a human being, potentially demonizing them and creating a hostile environment for those who have even had contact. I've met a lot of people who are contactees, internationally, and those who've had contact experience, or those who've those who've had contact experiences definitely embrace the new reality that's there, because in society you have one, how shall we put it, you have a sort of a consensus reality that's this, and then you have this other worldview which is a larger reality. See, that's the problem. You're back from the Galileo and Copernicus, and then whoop, then gradually. So there is a positive side of this, Tom, as well, and I think myself there will be a shift in global awareness, and there will be a deeper engagement with non-human intelligence. And the reason why that'll come about, because people are already ready for it. It's like it's not a blasé thing, so disclosure will be a boost to science and technology, and human sensing consciousness will expand. Now, there are uncertainties with all this. So, what are the intentions and capabilities of the non-human intelligence? Will the secret agenda of the national security state succeed, in this area? Will there be added positive social impacts, or, will there be more extreme negative reactions? So, yeah, it's really a confusion of things at the moment. I think we're in a state of flux on this one.
Fantastic. That's well, it's been an absolute treat to have an opportunity to ask you these things sort of face to face, Eamon. I can't thank you enough. But have you anything else from you, Jimmy, that you wanted to?
No, I think that's pretty much it for me. Where would people come and, so if people wanted to come and check out some of your work, Eamon, or to kind of follow you, where would be the best place for them to come?
Yeah, I've done not many now interviews. People could check up, say, with APEC. Tim Ventura would be one. I was on there the second time, and actually, to my surprise, when I was on there the first time, in fact, I was rather cajoled into it all by another had heard about me or met me, I think, some years back, and got onto Tim Ventura about this. And to be honest with you, I was actually quite reluctant, because I think at the time I thought, I don't want to be ridiculed or anything else, the stuff I'm doing. Tim Ventura came back a second time. I think it was 6 or 8 months later. And I said, well, isn't it good enough for what I've given you? Well, he said, I'm getting 3 or 4 emails a week. He said, you're actually really popular. I said, really? In my ignorance of, social media, not in it, and checking up on any of this stuff. And indeed, I looked over, I thought, oh my God, yeah, there's a lot of people interested in this. I was on a site, I was interviewed by, what was it, somebody in London there late last year. And he said, why haven't we known about you? Well, no one has asked me. I said, you're used to all your Nick Popes and everybody else talking about the same regurgitation of the same stuff for over 30 years, 20 years. I said, no one has actually asked me. I said, I'm not pushing myself at all. I do my science through getting papers published. And if people are interested in that, that's fine. If I'm going to be interviewed, great, I'll just tell you another one was, I think it was last year. I really was surprised about this, but I was on Sky Television interview by 2 people that you probably know. One is Craig Charles from the Red Dwarf, I think it was, and Sarah Scoodgrass. So I was approached on this, and I said, well, why me, through the producers? Well, you seem to know a lot about the UFOs, from the past. Oh, it's okay. So it actually was to do with the November 2018 case in the southwest of Ireland. We had 4 airlines independently had seen this flotilla of UFOs, and they were in interaction with ATC and Shannon. And of course, that went viral, on the main news and so forth. So, interesting enough, there was nothing planned for this, so it was quite spontaneous. But Sarah Scudgrass had quite a lot of questions because she's an astronomer herself, and Craig Charles had the same. So it actually got to a point where I was answering all their questions. In fact, they exhausted all the questions. And then for the very first time, Craig Charles, he sort of looked up to me and said, well, Eamonn, well, what's your opinion about all this? And I was thinking to myself, now I can actually tell them. So I did. And I think I blew them off the set after about 2 or 3 minutes because I was showing the evidence for this.
Yeah.
And actually, Craig Charles actually did say to me, Eamonn, you've blown my mind. And look at Sarah, another scientist. And she was like goggle-eyed. You could see her. I don't think she knew what to do after that. But see, the thing, this is all down to a psychological perception problem for people. For me, people that know me, personally, it's all normal. All right. It's like you could be in my presence. I could talk about stuff, and a lot of people are blown with a lot of stuff, not just the research I do, but also experiential stuff I've done as well, which would be like fiction to a lot of people. So sorry, I'm rambling on a little bit here, but Tim Ventura would be the place to if people want to check up on
Super.
the stuff to do with the autonomous surveillance of the Earth by UFOs, and also in there, if I remember, there's the communication side, as well.
Fantastic. Okay, well, I think that's probably a really good place to wrap it up. I really appreciate your time and talking to us today. It's been fascinating, and hopefully we'll get to speak again in the future.
Thank you for inviting me, both of you, on this. I enjoy this kind of stuff anyway. For other people, they freak out at some of the stuff I do anyway.
Yeah. Oh, it was a real treat, Eamonn. I can't thank you enough. It's
You're most welcome,
inspiring
Tom.
stuff.
And there will be a paper that actually I have. Sorry, I'm going on a little bit. There's a paper that came out just 2 or 3 weeks ago, and this is I'm co-authored on this paper. It will be, well, it'll be published in Astrophysics and Aerospace Technology. It's a big American journal, but it actually came out on the ResearchGate as an abstract. And what it's about is to do with living plasmoids in outer space and also terrestrial.
Fascinating.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I'm
So
absolutely
that,
fascinated by that.
are
Yeah.
you? Yeah, because
Yeah.
it fits in with the Foo Fighters back in
Yes,
the 40s.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely right.
also the Washington DC flyover,
Yeah.
1952.
Yeah.
It fits in
Yeah.
with that as
Yeah.
well. No, I will have another paper, which is probably the one that's really a complex one to do at the moment, and that's the controlled autonomous surveillance of the Earth. How the UFOs are operating around the Earth. And I've got, as I said, I'm using about 500 million reports for this, validated. And that I'm still working on the modeling as we speak now. Using Python. You might have heard of Python.
Yeah.
And also aerospace software as well to do with orbits. And I'm hoping actually, if we make this breakthrough, I'm optimistic, mind you, but although we're still working away on this, but I'm optimistic that we may actually have hundreds of locations around the Earth where people actually can get out their smartphones and actually start recording the UFOs, at that location. These will be computerized timing graphs that we would show for that particular location, and then people, all they have to do is go there, and there's no guarantee it's going to work, If it works, it'd be just amazing.
Absolutely.
Because then it actually brings the whole UAP area into another level altogether. It's showing that, yes, not only is a reality, but they've been surveying the planet now for the last 140 years, and so forth. So for me, that's probably the most exciting research paper for this year. Well, the second one coming up this year. That could be around in the next 4 or 5 months, that particular one.
Well, hopefully we'll stay in contact, and it'd be good to talk again, perhaps after after that paper comes out. That would be a great one to discuss, I think, if you'd be up for that.
Yeah, sure, Jimmy. Yeah, that'll be fine. Happy about that.
Okay, in that case, then I'll call it a wrap there. And thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it, and hope to speak to you again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy, and Tom as well.
Cheers.
Bye now.